What's up, everybody? Welcome to Simply Sunday. I'm your host, Mr. Full Service, and let's get right into it. Colossians chapter 2, verse 8 states, "See to it that no one takes you captive to hollow and deceptive philosophy, which depends on human tradition in the elemental spiritual forces of the world, rather than on Christ." Like I said. Welcome back, everybody. Welcome to Simply Sunday. I'm your host, Mr. Full Service, and we got a good show for y'all today. So, as you've probably noticed within the past few years, social media, public schools, and even higher universities have become nothing more than breeding grounds and indoctrination camps for the left, especially when it comes to censorship of conservative voices. Now, recently, Alejandro Mayor, the Secretary of Department of Homeland Security, was actually called out about this very censorship. And you know what? I'm going to just play the video. You can see it for yourself. Here we go.
Louisiana. Secretary Mayorkas, we have the frustrating responsibility on this committee of providing oversight of your agency, but I have to be honest and tell you, I'm not sure exactly what you do at the Department of Homeland Security other than great harm. On your watch, the data is pretty clear. We've had record levels of illegal immigration, a rapid decline in deportations, skyrocketing fentanyl deaths across our country, and the Secret Service, which is a DHS component, can't determine who left cocaine at the White House. In the middle of all this, you created the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Agency, CISA, which is a division of DHS. And it's one of the Biden administration agencies that colluded with and coerced the social media companies to censor Americans' protected free speech online. That's specifically detailed in a 155-page court opinion that came out of the federal court in Louisiana in the landmark litigation of Missouri v. Biden. Have you read that court opinion?
Congressman, I have not, and the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency does not censor speech.
Okay, well, the court found otherwise, and it's really curious to me. Actually, it's quite alarming that you haven't read the opinion, because your agency is listed in this opinion. The federal court looked at volumes of evidence over months of litigation, and they determined, among other things, that if the allegations made by the plaintiffs, the states in this case, are true, and hold on, the preliminary injunction was granted against your agency, sir, and other Biden administration agencies, including the DOJ and FBI, the court said it involves the most massive attack against free speech in United States history. And you're telling me this opinion issued July 4th has not reached your desk? No one's briefed you on it?
Oh, I have been briefed on the Missouri litigation.
Okay, but you haven't taken the time to read it yet.
Congressman,
no, hold on. Have you read it or not?
I have read parts of it, Congressman.
Oh, parts of it. Did you read the parts where it said that this is Orwellian and dystopian?
Do you see how he flipped? You see how he changed that? Oh, well, no, I haven't heard it. I haven't read it. All of a sudden, oh, you get called out on it. Oh, well, yeah, I've read parts of it, you know.
Yeah. And that your agency is involved in a massive cover-up of specifically conservatives' free speech online?
Congressman, the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency is not involved in such conduct.
Okay, well, the court found otherwise, and you stand here under oath and you give us these answers that we know are not true because this is demonstrably untrue. I'm suggesting to you that you're saying things to us under oath that are proven by the record to be untrue. Let me ask you about this specifically. CISA was created to, we call it the Misinformation and Disinformation Subcommittee of CISA. You familiar with that?
Congressman,
MDM, the MDM subcommittee, you're familiar with that?
Congressman, I am very well aware of the threat of disinformation emanating from adverse nations.
Are you familiar with the subcommittee? Just answer the question.
I am.
Okay. Does it still exist?
Congressman, are you speaking of the...
Does the MDM subcommittee still exist?
I would have to get back to you on that.
Okay. All right. Kind of a big deal in your agency. I'm kind of shocked that you don't know the answer to that. Can you define what misinformation is?
Congressman, misinformation is false information that is disseminated to...
Excellent. Who determines what is false?
Congressman, our focus...
No, who determines what is false in your agency? If you're going to pull something off the internet and collude with a social media platform to make sure Americans don't see it, who determines what's false?
Congressman, we don't do that.
That's not true. That is not true. That is not what the court has found. This is not a Republican talking point. This is what the documents show. We've had people testify under oath that say, and you just defined the term, you're telling me that you don't know who determines what is false?
Congressman, what we do at CISA, the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, is identify the tactics that adverse nation states use to weaponize disinformation.
Okay, what is disinformation? What is disinformation?
Disinformation is inaccurate information.
Who determines what's inaccurate? Who determines what's false? Do you understand the problem here? The reason the framers of our Constitution did not create an exception for quote unquote false information from the First Amendment is because they didn't trust the government to determine what it is. And you have whole committees of people in your agency trying to determine what they define as false or misinformation.
That is not true.
Well, then what is true? Please enlighten us.
What we do is we disclose the tactics that adverse nation states are utilizing to weaponize disinformation.
No, sir. The court found specifically, it's a finding of fact that is not disputed by the government defendants, the Biden administration, your agency, the FBI, or DHS, not in the litigation. They determined you and all of your cohorts made no distinction between domestic speech and foreign speech. So don't stand there and tell me under oath that you only focused on adversaries around the world, foreign actors. That's not true.
Okay, so as you can see, Mayorkas has tried to spin it as if this Department of Ministry of Truth or whatever was just targeting foreign entities. Like we're just trying to slow the spread of misinformation from foreign entities. But what a court determined was that isn't true. They were actually using this to censor domestic voices. In other words, what it really comes down to is they were censoring conservative opinions when it came to things like the border, when it came to Biden, when it came to Hunter's laptop, when it came to the coronavirus, when it came to censorship in general. And that's what happens with the leftists. They want you quiet. They don't want you to talk against things that you know to be true. We know that with everything that happened with COVID, the shutdowns, and then you have what happened with the election. They don't want you to talk about these things. They don't want it to be a discussion, because once discussions actually happen, facts will start to come out. So instead, let's just shut it down. We're going to call it disinformation. We're going to say it's misinformation or disinformation, and we're going to keep it pushing. And unfortunately, that isn't just happening on social media. That's also what's happening in our public school systems and our higher education systems, such as universities, okay? It's become breeding grounds of indoctrination. But what's so funny is we have all these conversations online. And I'm usually talking to people who are leftists, and I don't call them liberals anymore, because liberals and leftists, definitely not the same thing, and they definitely don't have the same ideology. So I have these conversations with a lot of leftists, and every single leftist that I speak to always has this inflated sense of ego or inflated sense of self-importance. In other words, my opinion is way more valid and way more important than yours. So I need you to be quiet and just go along with it. Or the leftists who have graduated, have their master's degree or something like that. And they equate having a master's degree or a doctorate or even a law degree or something like that to actual intelligence. And I've had to explain so many times that is actually false. You don't equate to a person's intelligence by the degrees that they hold. Well, not in total. In other words, just because you have a degree doesn't mean you're intelligent. I know plenty of smart dummies, and I know most of y'all do as well. I was like, the only thing that your degree tells me is that you were able to succeed within certain structures. That's it. It doesn't tell me if you're smart. It doesn't tell me even how well you did. Now, I've also had. Have y'all ever heard of the appeal to authority fallacy? Now, this is that fallacy where who are educated in certain subjects believe that they have an overall say so and believe that they can't be wrong. Make sense? Now, I'm going to have to. Inked, this is for you. Let me put these bad boys back on here. How do I look, y'all? It's so funny. Like, I finally got my glasses back in, and my son-in-law didn't even remember me having glasses. So I had to point to my old videos and pictures so he could actually remember that. Yeah, I'm actually fully a nerd. So anyway, I digress. So I've been having these conversations with a lot of people who are in education or educators who really believe that certain things like critical race theory. I've had so many conversations when it comes to critical race theory. And these educators are trying to tell me that critical race theory is not being taught in K through 12 schools. Well, I know that's false. And I would absolutely love the smug looks on their faces as they ask me, well, what do you know? You're a barber, like, what do you know about critical race theory? I bet you don't even know what critical race theory is. Of course, I get to flex my little brain power muscle because I'm actually, I love to read and I love to learn new things. So I would, of course, go back to when I actually studied Derek Bell, who is one of the godfathers of critical race theory, and I actually studied this in college. And then, of course, I started to read Gene Stefanchik and Richard Delgado, Kimberly Crenshaw, and all the new CRT manuals. And they were like, well, that doesn't really. I was like, it is a way of looking at everything through the critical lens of race. In other words, if a white man and a black man walk into a store at the same time, if the clerk helps the black man first, it's because he's racist and he doesn't trust a black person to be in the store by themselves, unattended. If he helps the white man first, it is because he is a racist and does not believe that black person deserves his attention before the white man. I said it's just a divisive tool. It's actually supposed to stay in college and university as a discussion, but we have been pushing it onto children who can't actually articulate or have the conversation because they don't know the other side of the argument. No, that was John Amanchaku is actually the man's name. Hey, Prince. So then, of course, they try to tell me, well, it's not really being taught. So I'm one of those ones who I'm like a dog with a bone. So I would show them literally where the NEA has been pushing critical race theory and that it's actually the core tenets of CRT that have infiltrated into K through 12 schools, such as systemic racism, white privilege, white fragility, predatory white imaginations, basically telling white people that they are inherently racist and they are irredeemable. These are the core tenets that have been pushed in through K through 12 schools. But of course, they'll be like, oh, well, that's not true. So of course, I'll go back and like I said, I will show them where the NEA is, I think, now the second biggest. It might be the number one, but it's either one or two. But it's one of the nation's largest teachers unions. It approved a plan to actually implement critical race theory in over 14,000 schools across the country. Now, there was a whole document that came out that got leaked. They weren't expecting it, to where they were actually raising money to combat critical race theory not being taught in school. So, I would sit there and point this out, and that would kind of end the argument on whether or not critical race theory was actually being taught. But like a good leftist, they usually move the goalposts on me, and they'll be like, well, It's actually, oh, if it is being taught, it's because it is a more accurate way of looking at the past. Of course, you know me, I have to ask my questions. Like, how so? How do you believe that it's more accurate? And that will, usually it's, well, it tells the truth about slavery, about what really happened and how bad the white slave owners and blah blah. And I was like, okay, all right. So if we're going to take that approach, and you want to talk about slavery, of course, you keep telling me that slavery started in 1619. The problem is, it didn't. Slavery started way back before America or the British colonies or the Europeans or anything ever got involved. It was actually Africans selling other African tribes for profit or for goods. And then the Portuguese and then the other Europeans start to get involved. We don't even talk about the fact that the Chinese were involved way before the white man got involved in it, right? But everybody just, oh, it's a white man. But then, of course, they don't even want to talk about Anthony Johnson. They don't want to talk about Anthony Johnson, who actually was the first slave owner, chattel slave owner in America. The ones who came on the White Lion in 1619, they were indentured servants. They were supposed to be in servitude for up to, I think it was up to 7 years, if I remember correctly. And then they were freed and they were given a plot of land. Now, Anthony Johnson, of course, once he was freed, he got his own servants to help work his land. Well, one of those servants happened to be a very lazy person. So what did he do? He went to the courts. I want you to hear this. A black man in the 1600s goes to the British colony courts to petition to be granted the freedom of another black man, right? And the court obliges him. Boom, now you have chattel slavery. In other words, Anthony Johnson was given this man's freedom indefinitely. But they don't want to really talk about that, nor do they want to talk about the Quakers who were the first abolitionists, not only in the British colonies, but over in Britain, in Great Britain. They don't want to talk about that. They don't want to talk about the fact that slavery was actually being put on the table to be ended as early as the 1500s. So they can miss, it's one of those situations where you can actually miss me. You can miss me all the way with that. Now, I'm going to say it like this. I may not have a degree when it comes to history, but I'm a history fanatic. Right? I believe that it needs to be taught as it was. No sugarcoating. Let's be real. Most Americans are fat. And if they start sugarcoating things, we're probably going to eat it up anyway. Right? Just saying. Now, one of the tools that I am absolutely so happy about was Prager University. Now, Prager University is actually starting to become available in public schools. Now, one of the first Prager University videos I ever watched was by a lady by the name of Carol Swain, Professor Carol Swain from Vanderbilt University. And it's so funny how it actually started because, you see, back in like 2017, I was kind of on the fence. I really hadn't been paying very much attention to politics. It was one of those situations where I was always told that the Democrats were the party for black people. My parents told me that. The friends, I grew up in a predominantly black neighborhood. So nobody really discussed politics en masse, but I was always taught that Democrats were the party for black people. So I never really questioned it. I never looked any further, never thought about it. Now, that being said, I was actually having a discussion because I had seen Charlottesville, what happened in Charlottesville, and what the news media was doing to Donald Trump. And I knew right then and there that the news was really lying when it came to Donald Trump. So I was having a discussion in the barbershop about Republicans versus Democrats. And, they were talking about the party switch. Now, my client was telling me, of course, he was like, Glenn, you really believe in a party switch? And I was like, well, yeah, at one time, the Republicans were the ones who freed the slaves, but then they became the Democrats of today, or And he was like, you really believe that? I was like, well, yeah, that's He was like, I want to show you something. So he sends me this Prager University video. I'd never heard of Prager University. And like I said, it was Dr. Carol Swain. And I actually want to play this video for y'all because I want y'all to see what it was that I saw. All right.
Once upon a time, every student of history, and that meant pretty much everyone with a high school education, knew this. The Democratic Party was the party of slavery and Jim Crow, and the Republican Party was the party of emancipation and racial integration. Democrats were the Confederacy, and Republicans were the Union. Jim Crow Democrats were dominant in the South, and socially tolerant Republicans were dominant in the North. But then, in the 1960s and 70s, everything supposedly flipped. Suddenly, the Republicans became the racists, and the Democrats became the champions of civil rights. Fabricated by left-leaning academic elites and journalists, the story went like this. Republicans couldn't win a national election by appealing to the better nature of the country. They could only win by appealing to the worst. Attributed to Richard Nixon, the media's all-purpose bad guy, this came to be known as the Southern Strategy. It was very simple. Win elections by winning the South. And to win the South, appeal to racists. So the Republicans, the party of Lincoln, were to now be labeled the party of rednecks. But this story of the two parties switching identities is a myth. In fact, it's three myths wrapped into one false narrative. Let's take a brief look at each myth in turn. Myth number one, in order to be competitive in the South, Republicans started to pander to white racists in the 1960s. Fact, Republicans actually became competitive in the South as early as 1928 when Republican Herbert Hoover won over 47% of the South's popular vote against Democrat Al Smith. In 1952, Republican President Dwight Eisenhower won the southern states of Tennessee, Florida, and Virginia. And in 1956, he picked up Louisiana, Kentucky, and West Virginia too. And that was after he supported the Supreme Court decision in Brown versus Board of Education that desegregated public schools, and after he sent the 101st Airborne to Little Rock Central High School to enforce integration. Myth number two, Southern Democrats, angry with the Civil Rights Act of 1964, switched parties. Fact, of the 21 Democratic senators who opposed the Civil Rights Act, just one became a Republican. The other 20 continued to be elected as Democrats or were replaced by other Democrats. On average, those 20 seats didn't go Republican for another 2.5 decades. Myth number three, since the implementation of the Southern Strategy, the Republicans have dominated the South. Fact, Richard Nixon, the man who is often credited with creating the Southern Strategy, lost the Deep South in 1968. In contrast, Democrat Jimmy Carter nearly swept the region in 1976, 12 years after the Civil Rights Act of 1964. And in 1992, over 28 years later, Democrat Bill Clinton won Georgia, Louisiana, Arkansas, Tennessee, Kentucky, and West Virginia. The truth is, Republicans didn't hold a majority of Southern congressional seats until 1994, 30 years after the Civil Rights Act. As Kevin Williamson of National Review writes, if Southern rednecks ditched the Democrats because of a civil rights law passed in 1964, it is strange that they waited until the late 1980s and early 1990s to do so. They say things move slower in the South, but not that slow. So what really happened? Why does the South now vote overwhelmingly Republican? Because the South itself has changed. Its values have changed. The racism that once defined it doesn't anymore. Its values today are conservative ones, pro-life, pro-gun, and pro-small government. And here's the proof. Southern whites are far more likely to vote for a Black conservative like Senator Tim Scott of South Carolina than a white liberal. In short, history has moved on.
Listen, I'm sorry. I got to stop it right there just for a second because I got to say something. It was that part. It was what she just said in that part that really got my wheels turning. She was like, if you think that the Republicans are so racist, then tell me, why is it that they would vote for a Black man as opposed to a liberal white person? And then it dawned on me, it wasn't about their color. It wasn't about their race. It was about their policies. It's about what they believed in. They were pro-life. They were pro-gun. They were, well, of course, anti-abortion and anti-big government. And I was like, those are all things that I am. I was like, I believe that everybody has the right to life. I believe that everyone should have the right to be able to defend themselves. And like I said, it sent me down a whole rabbit hole when it came to Prager University videos. But I'm going to let Dr. Swain finish up.
Like other regions of the country, the South votes values, not skin color. The myth of the Southern strategy is just the Democrats' excuse for losing the South, and yet another way to smear Republicans with the label racist. Don't buy it. I'm Carol Swain, professor of political science and law at Vanderbilt University for Prager University.
So, as I was saying, that was actually the first video that got me started on Prager University, got me going down the rabbit hole. And it's so funny that so many people on the left will be like, oh, that's propaganda. Oh, they are about, and I was like, okay, well, do me a favor. Where's the propaganda? What part of that, what Dr. Swain, what part of her video wasn't true? And I would sit there and wait. I was like, show me what she just said and show me where it's not true. Of course, it's crickets. It's always crickets because a lot of people who are leftists, they appeal to emotion as opposed to logic, intellect. Now, at this point, like I said, back in 2017, I wasn't a full conservative, or at least not an ideology just yet, because, you know, when new information gets you or gets into you, it takes a second to really process. So, like I said, it started me down the rabbit hole. I mean, as you can see, there is so much information when it comes to Prager University. You have fireside chats, you have 5-minute videos, you have stories of us. As a matter of fact, let me go up here. Now listen, y'all gonna get to see some of the stuff that I actually watch. Here's my watch list. Why the 3/5 Compromise was anti-slavery, The Plantation, Democratic South, Brandon Tatum. I'm not gonna butcher that man's name. You know who this is. Most of us have seen his videos when it comes to Instagram and even in TikTok. And he actually did the same thing. He red pilled himself. He actually went to Prager University videos to try to prove that they weren't real or to prove that they weren't accurate. And what happened is he basically deprogrammed himself to all the things that universities and public schools will teach you. If you hadn't noticed, you don't get the full story when it comes to public schools. Why? Because they will shout down and censor voices that are dissenting. Like right now, we have the whole transgender isms and things like that that are going on in public schools. Did you see the video right there, right? This right here is Chloe Cole. If you haven't heard of Chloe Cole, that is the young lady who is a detransitioner. So By the age of 13, she started suffering from gender dysphoria. And instead of her doctors and her parents saying, you know what, we need to deal with the mental aspect first. No, the first thing these doctors did was sit there and lie to the parents and start shoving down flippant ideology of transitioning this child. By the age of 15 or 16, she cut her breasts off. By the age of 18, she realized she had made a huge mistake, and it's irreversible. But they don't give you the full picture. They don't give you the full scope. And anyone who says anything otherwise is censored, shut down, or labeled. But that is also another video that I really think that people should go and watch. And this is why they do not want Prager University or anything like Prager University to be taught in public schools. They fear the other side of the conversation coming through loud and clear. As a matter of fact, Dennis Prager himself just went to the ASU legislature talking about how they were trying to shut him down. Now they were trying to censor the man. How in public funded universities, Michael Knowles, Ben Shapiro, Matt Walsh, Candace Owens, Dennis Prager, any conservative voice, they try to censor and shut down by whatever means they can. They will pull the fire alarms. They will do bomb threats, whatever they can do to censor the conversation, because let's be real. When conservatives and actual ideas and the other side of the argument comes to light, their story and their stranglehold on public education and their chokehold starts to loosen up. So I want to show you what Dennis Prager actually did at Arizona the legislature, because it's actually pretty interesting. Now, I'm not going to play the whole video. I just want y'all to hear little snippets of this.
My name is Dennis Prager, and I am 40 years. I have been a radio talk show host with a national show. So I believe, among other things, I'm the longest ongoing talk show in America, which is relevant because if I were a purveyor of hate, it's odd to imagine I would have been on for 40 years and continue to be on. And it's also relevant because I believe I have talked with, not to, but with more people than any living human being. It's not a boast. It's just a statement of I come to my views on life having actually talked with vast numbers of people from every background. There are people who are transgender who call my show, not to mention every other group that one can imagine. The reason they feel free to is because they know I will not insult them, and because I believe it is so critical to have my show open to anyone. The antithesis of what these 37 professors believe. I will come to them momentarily. I'm also the co-founder of Prager University, or PragerU, which has over 1 billion views a year, mostly of young people. We have been the recipient of many attempts to suppress us on YouTube. The last time I was at a panel like this was in Washington prior to the lockdowns. And it was on YouTube and Google owns YouTube, suppressing some of my own videos on PragerU. We have about 600 5-minute videos. They come out every week. I have done 1/10 of them. 9/10 are done by others. Among mine are 11 on the 10 Commandments. And one of them was, in fact, suppressed by Google. The Google representative, the YouTube Google man, was there in the Senate committee. Senator Ted Cruz asked him, why did you put Mr. Prager's video, why did you take it off why did you put it on the restricted list so that children couldn't see it, libraries couldn't see it, schools couldn't see it? And he said with a straight face, because it mentions murder. So when it was my...
Now, see, that's some of those tactics that the leftists will use. They'll say things like, oh, well, it mentioned this. It said something about murder. That's inappropriate for children. Yet that's the same party that wants to push sexually explicit material to elementary school children. Make that make sense. So that's a nice segue into what we're actually about to get into. So amongst the things that are happening, like I said, this is just a clip, a snippet of what's going on in public schools. Now you have radical gender ideology that is also being taught as if it is actually a fact. You have queer theory, you have gender theory, you have leftist professors and teachers that are beginning to push these radical ideas, like I said, as if they were fact. They tell us to trust the science, but they're also the same ones who, as Matt Walsh would say, can't tell you what a woman is. You ask a leftist what is a woman, and they will just tell you how they feel. It is it's the way that you feel, because that is really scientific. Anyone who wants to be a woman, you can be a woman if you feel like a woman. That's stupid. I'm sorry. That's stupid. That's asinine. And it's sad that you degrade women to that extent, that you just say that, oh no. Anybody, a man, a grown man, can put on a wig, and all of a sudden, just because he has that wig and the mentality, he's a woman. I don't buy that. But like I said, this is what they are pushing into schools as if it was actually true, or that it is. And children are very impressionable. Now, we all went to school with that person, like I said, who's an Izzy. Like, we always had that feeling that they could be, but it didn't really matter. But it was rare. But if you actually look at Pew Research nowadays, it's 1 in every 4 school student believes themselves to be a part of the LGBTQ, some sort of identifying marker of the LGBTQ. There's no way. There is no way possible. This is unfortunately what happens when you popularize mental illness. Gender dysphoria, whether you look at it like that or not, is mental illness. And then, of course, you have the intersectionality between the LGBTQ and Black issues. It's funny that they always try to equate the two together. And the reason why they do that is because of the labels. If they can put LGBTQ issues and mix it with Black issues, then not only can now you be labeled as a homophobe or a transphobe, now you're going to be labeled as a racist. But I'll tell you ahead of time, I'm not afraid of race. I'm not afraid of labels. You can label me all you want to. I know exactly who I am, and what I believe in. And I do not believe that this is the ideology that needs to be taught to children. If it's going to happen, it's going to happen. You don't have to force the issue. And then they get mad at us when we call them groomers. We call them groomers because of what you're pushing. You're pushing pornographic images into children's schools. Perversion into children's schools and children's materials. And then when the parents sit there and speak up about it, you have the Southern Poverty Law Center putting them on a terrorism watch list. Yeah, now understand, the Southern Poverty Law Center is a flipping joke to begin with. It's absolutely a joke to begin with. But then you have others who are the school teachers or the proponents of this radical ideology that will start to call people those tropes, those, oh, you're homophobic, you're transphobic. Guess what? It's not just books like Gender Queer that we had issues with. It's This Is Perfectly Normal, which actually displays heterosexual sex. We don't think that heterosexual sex and perversion are things that you should be pushing onto elementary school teachers. This is another reason why I was so happy that Governor DeSantis had the parental rights in education bill down in Florida, because now these groomers who masquerade themselves as educators couldn't hide behind the blanket. So they had to be out in the open about the things that they were teaching and pushing toward children. And it's so funny because one of the biggest voices is actually a guy that I have come to absolutely love watching his videos. And this is when Prince is going to tell me that I'm going to sneeze, just so y'all know. Hey, Lloyd. But the man's name is Pastor John Amanchaku. Pastor John Amanchaku. And he absolutely, you know what? I'm a shut up. I'm gonna let him do his thing.
Amanchukwu means I know God, and I'm glad to say that I do. I'm here today to talk about this book here. My name is John Amanchukwu, as I stated earlier. It's called It's Perfectly Normal for Students 10 and Up. This book details all kinds of sexual images, pictures of elderly people nude, pictures of an individual who's in a wheelchair with his penis out. All of these sexual pornographic images are made available and placed at the fingertips of children. And I'm sure, Dr. Cruz, I don't know if you knew about this before you signed on, but hopefully this is something that you can address and deal with, because this is immoral and asinine to allow children to be able to see this. Also, this book even shows images of two women having sex, a man and a woman having sex, and two men having sex. That's not perfectly normal. Who decides what's normal? Is it you? Is it you? Is it you? Is it you? Or do parents decide what should be placed at the fingertips and allowed to be taught to their children in the school system? I'll read some of this for you. It says, after a bit, a person's vagina becomes moist and slippery, and the clitoris becomes hard. After a bit, a person's penis becomes erect, stiff, and larger.
Pastor.
Sometimes a bit of clear fluid that may contain a few sperm comes out of the tip of the penis and makes it wet.
Can we, sir, I'm sorry.
Was it something I said? Was it something I said? If you don't want to hear it in a school board meeting, why should children be able to check it out of the school system? You see, we have perverts that are.
AJ, I know you're listening. I need that. I need that as a hat or a t-shirt or something. Is it something I said? Like, I need that as a hat or a t-shirt. Is it something I said? It's so funny that they were trying to cut him off from reading the same things that they want children to be able to read. Make that make sense. Oh, they were quick to try. Pastor. That's inappropriate. You can't be saying these. It doesn't get much better than that. What's so funny is I actually took the time to go look at a list of some of these sexually explicit books that they are trying to ban, from the schools. And I've had 1,000 conversations. Oh, it's just about censorship. No, it's about smut. It's about perversion. Do you know what happens to a child's mind when it is actually introduced to pornographic images at a very young age? You're not setting that person up for success or for a positive future. Let's just say it like that. So check this out. I'm going to show y'all this. Boop. This comes from the Daily Caller. Here are the sexually explicit books Florida is working to remove from public schools. And it goes on. There you go. Here's some of them. Here you go. This book is gay. This is the first one where everybody was talking about, oh, that's because they're homophobic. No, it's because of this. They have rimming, which is licking the butthole, by the way. Scat, which is eating poop, 2 girls, 1 cup. Scissor sisters. This is pushed toward children. Strap-on sex. This is pushed toward children. And they think that this should be allowed. You have genderqueer. I want you to pay attention. Do you see this? Do you see what this says? The following media includes potentially sensitive content. Now, I want you to understand, Google put this on there. This is the same book that they want elementary, middle school, and high school children to be able to read. Yet Google has to put an explicit warning label over it. Make that make sense. Oh, look, little boy getting a blowjob. Isn't that precious? That is absolutely something that we need to have kids talking about. Let's talk about it. Talking about anal sex, vaginal sex, all kinds of sex. And again, this is pushed toward children 10 and up. It's perfectly normal. Changing bodies, growing up, sex, gender, and sexual health. 10 and up. These are the books that Florida was working on removing. And what happened is it started an avalanche. Other school districts were starting to have these things removed. These books like this removed. Now, in the foray, they had a lot of books that came into question, including a Rosa Parks book that started talking about rape and incest. Now, the book ended up being allowed in after the board looked at it and determined that it was okay as long as it was by the parents' permission. See, I'm old enough to remember when teachers and educators had to get our permission for us to read or watch anything that was sexually explicit. But now educators have taken the liberty of removing the parent and removing the parent's idea or what the parent could think and believe that they have the ultimate authority when it comes to it. As a matter of fact, I'm going to go ahead and play another one for you.
The last name is Amanchukwu.
Thank you very much for correcting me, Mr. Amanchukwu.
Yes, no problem.
Thank you.
It means I know God. Luke chapter 17:2 says that it's better for a person to have a millstone tied around their neck and to be thrown into the sea than for anyone to harm or damage a child. And so the question today to the school board is, only you know whether or not your role, the policies, the curriculum, and the things that you allow in this school system in Wake County, only you know whether or not a millstone is tied around your neck. The reality is this: God is going to judge every last one of you for decisions that are made on behalf of children. You know, this past year we spent $1 million on a diversity office. And how did that benefit black children? How did it benefit children in general? Well, 78% of 3rd through 8th grade black students are not proficient in math in Wake County. We're wasting taxpayer dollars putting money towards this diversity office that's not benefiting those who need it the most. 66% of 3rd through 8th grade students are not proficient in reading. Black students, they're not reading on grade level. They're not performing mathematically, and they're not going to be able to get jobs in the fields like STEM. But we're wasting money on a diversity, equity, and inclusion office while we are failing black students in the name of diversity.
Listen, it's the same thing that we've been talking about. You are wasting so much energy and effort on things that have no relevance. These students aren't able to read. These students aren't able to do math. These students are not performing at a proficient level. Yet you want to talk about diversity, equity, inclusion. Yet you want to talk about CRT. Yet you want to talk about gender and queer ideologies, which have nothing to do with science, have nothing to do with math, which have nothing to do with reading, have nothing to do with preparing these young children for a productive future. Nothing to do with it. You are not preparing them for you're not giving them their education. What you're doing is giving them an indoctrination on things that you believe are important, which is once again why I love DeSantis, because once again he put the parents back in the driver's seat, which is where it should be. Now, me personally, I've had this conversation so many times. This is why I don't really like public schools. If you can homeschool your child, do so. If you can get your child to a charter school or private school that you like, please do so. Because these public universities are nothing more than indoctrination camps. And then this is what's funny. They look down on people who go to trade schools, right? But why is it that the people who go to trade schools come out usually making more money? Now, that is unless you're a petroleum engineer or things like that. But let's be real. Most people who go into universities, they're not going into the STEM fields. They're not going into science, technology, engineering, mathematics. They're not going into those fields. They're going into liberal arts programs. They're going to be a philosophy major. They're going to be social workers. So the ones who go to trade school, I'll do it. I'll do one of those. Like I'll use me, for example. Me, I make more money doing what I'm doing now, which is something that I got from trade school that cost me 9 months of my life. And I come out with no debt than I did from university. Than I did with university. Yet they want to push you toward university because let's be real. Universities are married to the government. It goes hand in hand. Oh, yeah, it goes hand in hand. The universities get donations and things like that from politicians in order for their children to get into programs. Their children go into those programs that I just mentioned, even if they're not qualified. Oh, but we're not paying attention. Then they sell it to you. Oh, yeah, the only way that you can get out of your situation is if you enter into this contract with this university. At 18. You're able to get into this contract with the government or with the universities for loans for $25,000, $50,000 plus dollars, right? But they won't give you a loan to start a business. They don't want you to have financial literacy in high school, so you know how to actually use your money and where your money's going to. Isn't that crazy? Isn't that funny how that works out? But once again, this is another one where I got to give DeSantis down in Florida some props. He actually made it mandatory to graduate high school to have financial literacy courses. So you actually are knowing what kind of contract you're entering into when you're taking these student loans. I agree with that wholehearted, AJ. Aloysius Germain. Listen, university and the student loan program, one of the biggest scams ever. Biggest scams, biggest money pits that you'll ever get into. I can tell you just from personal experience going to the University of Cincinnati, out of my friends that I still know, maybe a fourth of them are doing what they went to school for. Maybe doing what they went to school for. See, I believe the easiest way is get yourself a trade. Go to trade school, become a carpenter, electrician, HVAC, diesel mechanic, construction, any of these things, CDL truck driver. Get some world experience. Work for a couple years. Make a little bit of money. Plumbers make crazy bank, by the way. But anyway, get yourself some world experience. And then if you choose to go to university. But it'll be after you have a little bit of worldwide experience. Because it's very rare. I won't say no one, but it's very rare that an 18-year-old knows what they want to do for the rest of their life, which is why you see so many people switching majors over and over again, or even people just flunking out because they are not interested or prepared for what they are signed up for. I was actually in the United States Army. I went through the ROTC program. I had a fantastic commanding officer. It's a black guy by the name of Captain Plummer, 81st Foxtrot out of Fort Knox, Kentucky. And he knew I was going to school for psychology. He was like, "Oh, so you want to be broke all your life?" I was like, "What do you mean?" I thought, you look on Yahoo, and this is how much, psychologists make. He was like, "No." He's like, "Let me ask you a real question. In your neighborhood where you came from, do you see any psychologists doing well?" And I really had to think about it. He was like, "Nah, you need to get into engineering." So I did. I actually listened to this man, and I went into mechanical engineering. Much better decision. Now, let's be real. I didn't really care for engineering. It's boring. It's boring. I'm an extrovert. I'm a people person. I don't like being stuck behind a computer screen, so it didn't work out for me. Ended up getting into this, what I'm doing now, and I love it. I make money to be satisfied and be happy. And that's all I need in life. Why'd I have to tell you the race? It wasn't important. I'm sorry, Kasha. So I'm gonna play one more video from Pastor John Amon. Y'all almost made me mess that man's name up. Amon Chakwu. All right.
There are 10 things that black students don't need. Number one, we don't need affirmative action.
Preach.
Number two, we don't need equity.
Preach.
Number three, we don't need to be pandered to.
Yes.
Number four, we don't need you to dumb down test scores in order for us to thrive.
Wow.
Number five, we don't need a school system promoting victim mentality.
Can I get an amen?
Number six, we don't need the soft bigotry of low expectations as we have heard from other people.
Woo.
We don't need, number seven, critical race theory or intersectionality.
Woo.
Number eight, we don't need reparations or any more welfare states.
Hallelujah.
Number nine, we don't need to be propped up as the darlings of the LGBTQ community,
Say it again.
as Dwayne Wade has done with his son, Zaire. Number 10, we don't need white liberals telling us that they know what's best for us
What?
than we know what's best for ourselves.
Oh, wait a minute. You mean that doesn't just happen to us? Oh, it doesn't just happen to me? Where you got the white liberals telling us, "Oh, okay. Okay, so this is all right. I'm just making sure."
And here's a bonus. We don't need Gavin Newsom creating space for pedophiles to have their legacy thrive in California. We don't need Gavin Newsom convincing us that Harvey Milk was a good man. Any man who takes his sexual organs and inserts them into children, that man should not be propped up as a saint. That man should not be lauded and celebrated. That man's legacy should be tarnished, removed, and never lifted up in this state ever again.
You know, that man goes hard. Period. Pastor John Amon Chakwu. Every time I say that man's name, I feel like I should be throwing a spear. That's neither here nor there. Anyway, oh yeah, Harvey Milk, very, very much so. Harvey Milk, you got Harvey Weinstein, you got the Roman Polanskis. It goes deeper. It just goes deeper. That whole Hollywood ring out there. I mean, Woody Allen. It gets deep. But what he was just listing out on the things that we need, the reparations, you don't need equity. You don't need equity and inclusion. You don't need white liberals telling you that exactly what, like the Joy Behars of the world. You don't need that mess. Guess what we do? I don't want equality of outcomes. I want equality of opportunity. I don't need you to rig the game. I just got to make sure that you get me in. That's it. I want my fair shot. People on the left hate to hear you say little phrases like pull yourself up by your bootstraps. But I'll ask this. What do you think you're supposed to do? Do you think things are just supposed to be handed to you on a silver platter? No. You get what you work for. And you don't sit there and cry and complain about the things that you don't have because you're not willing to work for them. That old keeping up with the Joneses is tired and played out. Worry about you. Make sure that you are successful. If you're an American, people kill themselves to get here because it is the land of opportunity. It is one of the only places in the world that you can start with nothing and finish with all you can imagine. Yet our public school systems are telling us to hate this place. And unfortunately, because the leftists control the conversation, you only get half of the story. Which, once again, I'm going to say it like this. I am so happy that Prager University and things like that are now going to be an available tool for public schools. Hopefully, it will help to undo some of this brainwashing that has been done to these children. All right. So that is our show for this evening. That has been Simply Sunday with your host, Mr. Full Service. We will be back next Sunday with a whole new hot show for you. Also, if you haven't done so, please hit that like button, subscribe, and make sure you leave us a comment. Let us know what you want us to talk about because I do not mind. I like the conversation. Also, the Trifecta Hour every Friday at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. For right now, it is on TikTok. Make sure you follow all of the pages, Trifecta Hour. We're on YouTube. It's on Twitter. It's on Facebook. It's on Instagram. There is no reason that you can't find it, so you can follow it. And trust me, between me, AJ, my girl Inked, and my twin brother Blue, we get down. We absolutely get down. We will not only be informing you, but we'll have you clutching your sides at the same time because it also gets hilarious. Like the humor in there, yeah, it's a lot of fun. So every Friday, 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, the Trifecta Hour. Make sure you come in, check us out. You will not regret it. And also, if you don't mind, follow me on my social medias because I post on Twitter, I post on Facebook, I post on Instagram, I post on TikTok, and I post daily on YouTube. All right? All right. Now that you're informed, you know. We will catch y'all next time. I hope you enjoyed yourself. This has been Simply Sunday with Mr. Full Service. Catch you next time.